is live.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Storytellers with Coffee. I know that there's a lot going on right now, and this is not wanting to take attention away from anything important going on, like the protests or the pandemic. This is just here in case you need a break. Uh, you know, it should not need to be said, but it must be said. Black Lives Matter, and police brutality has to stop. Uh, anyway, today we are going to talk with Steffi Duvet, who you were the lead developer, right, for
Yeah.
Legendlore? Awesome. Yeah, so Legendlore is going to be Onyx Path's new Kickstarter. It hasn't started yet, but soon, right?
Yeah, we were going to launch Tuesday, but we decided not to because we wanted to, we didn't want to take up space. It's currently planned for Thursday, and it looks like that is a go. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, I think they are still planning for Thursday.
Yep, last I heard, it's Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I'm Steffi. I'm a tabletop role-playing game designer and writer. I've worked on The Fall of London for Vampire 5th edition. I have worked on Legendlore. Now I'm currently working on something new, but I'm not sure if I'm still under NDA for that. So that's what I've been developing. And I've written for almost everything in the Onyx Path lineup. I don't think I'm on Pugmire yet, so I need to pester Eddie about that. But I think I've written or am writing for all of the other ones currently. No, Scartlands. Oh my God, Travis, hire me. But I've worked on all the rest. I've also worked for Chaosium and for 7th Sea, and I do a lot for Angry Hamster Publishing. So that's me in a nutshell. I run a Patreon where you can find me on Liz and Steffi, and I'm on Twitter if anybody wants to chat. I'm currently not posting much of my own content on Twitter. I'm trying to retweet people that need to be amplified. But when the world is not on fire, you can talk to me on Twitter.
Yeah, but the world is not on fire.
Some things need to burn.
Yes.
Yes, very true.
And Corinne, you've been on the show before, but if you want to introduce yourself to the audience too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm Corinne, otherwise known as Manic Pixie Girl on Twitter. I run the Scarred Lands 5e game that one of the Scarred Lands 5e games that's on Onyx Path Twitch, Purge of the Serpent Holds. And starting next week, I believe, unless we get pushed forward a week, I will be running a mini campaign of Legendlore. Will hopefully be exciting. We might get pushed forward a week, though. I don't know. It really depends on how Technocracy finishes up. But yeah, I'm really excited. I've been reading through the manuscript, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I think I'm going to be a player in both of your games. I'm really looking forward to that.
You're just doubling up on the Legendlore.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a chance to sort of explore the game from both angles. Because I think, Corinne, in your game, I'm going to play a Realmborn. And then I'll play, more like what the game intends and play a version of myself and Steffie's. So I'm excited. I did not know that this was portal fantasy, and that's one of my favorite genres.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I've already heard that Corinne is doing something else that I actually think is really brilliant. That also works really well with Legendlore. So I'm hoping that people see that and like it, and then use it for their own Pugmire, Forgotten Realms, Theros campaigns, what have you not.
Yeah, Travis originally had the idea. He's like, well, we already have a couple like games that are going to be doing the intention of Legendlore, like the beginning, or the original intention, which is playing yourself. And he's like, I was thinking, he was like, what if instead we kind of pitched it as a way, as like a side quest for other games, or like pulling, your characters from other games into this setting. And I was like, that's really cool. I'll write it right now. And so, yeah, in my game, it's you get to play characters from other settings within it, because, you know, if you're being pulled into a world, it doesn't necessarily mean you can only come from this world. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
going to be pretty cool. We're planning to have some Pugmire characters, some Scarred Lands characters, and then Rachel's Realmborn. So I think it'll be an interesting group of
Interesting
people.
mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also very curious to see, because one thing that I've found running Legendlore for people is that when you tell people that you're playing you, but you know, so not even a fantasy version of you, but literally you, but you cross into the realm and you gain a new people and you gain a new class, but you're still you. And the first thing people immediately do is they become, of course, conflict avoidant, as in we can't fight these goblins. These goblins live here, and I would feel really bad if I would just go to, oh, they're goblins, we can fight them. And that's actually part of what we did for the writing in Legendlore, that I wanted to make it clear that all people are people. And if the goblins are sometimes more aggressive than other people, it's because they have a right to. We wrote that into the setting, like things happened in their past, and yes, they are pissed. Justly so.
One of my
Um,
favorite Portal fantasies has a really, really cool arc about goblins and just that thing. So
yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, but
Uh,
it'll be interesting to see what people do when they're not playing themselves,
Yeah,
when they come from more traditional fantasy games, and you know.
I'm pretty interested to see that as well, and the comparison between the two games, like how people are, you know, how much it differs, like because it's the same setting in theory, but it's a very different way to play it. So
Yeah, very,
yeah,
very,
so
yes.
uh, I've got a list of questions that uh, mostly for Steffi, but also for Corinne because you will also be running a game. Um, and we do take audience questions, so if there is something that you would like to know, feel free to ask it in the Twitch chat. So let's start off with like what is Legend Lore? What's its inspiration? What's the elevator pitch?
So, Legendlore is originally a comics from the 80s where four friends open a magic chest and boom, they get teleported into a fantasy world with lots of different people and lots of conflict, and they have adventures, and one of them dies, and I think most of them eventually go back, and some of them stay. And we wanted to create a game based on the comics. But we did want to bring them, because the comics were written in the 80s, and we did want to bring them into 2020. Um, uh, and I have to say, the IP owners of the comics were really great about that. They let us do a lot with that. But yeah, so the elevator pitch is that all those games you ran where you inevitably stat at yourself, like, if I was a vampire, I would be a Toreador, and my mental would be the highest, and then my social, and then my those games, because I literally do not know any single role player who hasn't done that. But that's what we have. We have rules for that. We've got backgrounds for that that assume that you are a person from Earth. We've got everything that we've got backgrounds for everyone who we want to play our game. So you can be anything from an activist to a working poor, to a writer, to a role player, and you can cross into the realm and then play yourself and go on epic quests and maybe find your way home.
That sounds really fun. So when you were writing this game, did you draw on any other similar Portal fantasy stories for extra inspiration?
I did not actually, because the comics are fast. Uh, so I just read them back to back, and there was so much information in there. As a matter of fact, we had to not drop things, but we had to curate what we put in there because there was so much. So we're hoping for with the Kickstarter to get some stretch goals so that I can put that content in. For example, we focused on the realm is a big continent. It's called Azoth, and there's a mountain range in between, and you play in East Azoth, and West Azoth is largely, the comics never go there, but occasionally we hear rumors about West Azoth and what it's like. And I would love to see if we can maybe do a stretch goal that allows me to talk about West Azoth and pull in information from there. But no, there was so much in the comics that we didn't have to go anywhere else. We did, of course, a little bit at the back of my mind. I had the Dungeons and Dragons comics, you know, the one with the dungeon master and the what was it? Well, did that person had 5 heads? No, it didn't have 5 heads. He just had these beautiful horns. So we did try to keep that vibe a little. But apart from that, no, it's we pulled most of it out of the comics.
Cool. And so, are these comics out of print? Where could someone go read them if they decided that was something they want to do?
And you can actually they cleaned them up and they digitized them, and you can actually get all of them on drive-through comics currently digitally. And like I think it's 4 or 5 big volumes. I read all of them for research purposes, but they are genuinely good if you do account for the fact that they were written in the 80s. So there are some things that I read and I was like, we're gonna we gotta work with that. But the world that they built is still really, really good. It's marvelous. It has so much going on. It has so many different cultures because the idea is that the realm sits on a nexus of realities, and sometimes things drop through like Earth. They've also got an entire crossover with zombies that unfortunately we couldn't touch because that wasn't part of the IP that we got.
Oh darn! I want zombies.
Yeah, I know. Well, you can. We've got undead, and they fulfill a noble purpose. But looking at the art, it was so clear. Like, oh, this is France. This is literally the Notre Dame. Somebody took a picture of the Notre Dame and drew this cathedral. And that actually allowed us to play with, oh, what if that's on purpose? What if this country is a lot like medieval France? What if this country is a lot like medieval England? So we actually played around with that a bit, and that was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So this is for both of you. So how should someone who wants to run a Legendlore game, so how should you approach it and how should you start?
Talking a lot, so I'm going to let Corinne take this one first.
Well, as someone who was totally unfamiliar with Legendlore before I was approached to run a game for it, the first thing I did was I read through as much of the manuscript as I could. Of course, I skipped, certain sections that I didn't think would be relevant to me, like, I'm definitely not going to have people go to this place, so I'm not going to read up on this place, because I don't necessarily need to know about this place right now. But on the whole, I tried to absorb the idea of the setting first, the idea that there are people and things and even places coming through to the realm at all times. And because of that, the world is very much kind of in flux. It's very influenced by many other things. And I think that's a very important thing to include, when you are describing the world that your players are in. Throw in little fun things like, your character may not know this, depending on what your character knows, but this, for instance, looks like French architecture, like was mentioned. And that's just very much a part of the world. I would say that if you're trying to run a game like I am, where your players aren't playing themselves, but they are instead, you're using this as a side story, taking pre-existing characters and throwing them into this world because they, hit a crossing, then I think you can play around a lot with what it is they're trying to do. For instance, this isn't going to be too much of a spoiler, Rachel, because I think I already mentioned it. The players in my game are going to be trying to find a strange thing, so an item from Earth, that is causing havoc in the realm. So you can have your players searching for something or doing something that actually has to do with a real world item, even though they aren't themselves from the real world. Whereas if you're doing, the game as it's kind of more intended, which is you playing yourself, then I think that's a totally different realm that I don't have as much experience in, given I haven't been building for that for my campaign.
Neat. Thank you so much. That was a really cool answer. Steffi, what about you?
Yeah, so for Legendlore, I would always start with a session 0 if you play it as we're all us, because people come with baggage that you might not know about. And you need to decide what you want to take into the realm and what you don't, because there are days you go through a crossing and it instantly renders an ideal version of you. Because obviously it's a game and we want you to have fun. But that might mean that somebody who's in a wheelchair might decide my ideal version is in a wheelchair, so I'm in a wheelchair in the realm. But another person might decide my ideal version can actually walk. And you need to figure that out, and that's individual to each person, obviously. So you need a session 0 to figure out exactly what people want to play, what they want to bring with them. We even have the option of playing an alternate you for those of us who would just go completely bonkers if we were transported into another realm and be like, I have to go home now. I have loved ones who depend on me. I need to go. So we even got you covered for that. But yeah, so you need to discuss all of that. You need to discuss how much do we want to focus on getting home? Do we want to play with time? Because you could say that time moves differently, so that you can have fast bunches in the realm and then come back and it's just 5 minutes, which takes a lot of the pressure off getting home. But you could also say, no, it's one-on-one. So if you spend a year in the realm, you'll be gone for a year. And that puts the pressure back on. But of course, we want people to enjoy the game. So you need to discuss this beforehand and make sure everyone is on the same line and that everyone moves into the realm with a version of themselves that they want to bring with them. So yeah, I would say that you have to start with a session 0 for just about any campaign, but it's especially relevant when people are playing themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's always how I would start, and that's actually how we are gonna. I think that's a bit of a different than most Twitch shows do it. We're actually going to start with a session 0. We're going to create our characters together on screen, and we're going to talk about what kind of a game do we want to play, because there's also the fact that, like I said, people might not like a combat heavy game if it's you. I mean, the crossing can prepare you for combat. If you're like Perfect Me would know how to wield a sword because I watch a lot of movies, or I'm a huge fan of the Hunger Games, and watching Katniss in action makes me a perfect archer once I cross into the realm. That's perfectly valid. You can absolutely do that. But then you do have a bit of, are you going to then shoot the goblins? And if players are like, no, I don't want to shoot sentient things, which is a very valid stance to take, then of course that means that as a DM, you have to run your game in a way that people can avoid the physical confrontations. So yeah, so that's how we'll be starting. And that's how I highly recommend everybody does for a Legendlore campaign.
Yeah, so you touched on this a little bit, but it looks like our Twitch user Juan Cuifon, I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing that. How does Legendlore handle disability if an ideal self is in a wheelchair or blind or something else?
Well, we actually considered if we should make rules for that, and we decided no, because the rule is that we want the player to determine these things because they know what they want and what they don't want. So the only rule is the player is going to tell you, the GM, how you handle this, and then you do that. So if somebody's in a wheelchair and they would say, oh, I want to bring the wheelchair with me, and I would love it if we could have me find a flying steampunk wheelchair, then that is what you provide. But if that person is like, no, actually, I like the idea of playing around with the fact that if we are running through a jungle, that there might be places that I physically can't get to, that seems like an interesting challenge, then that is how you run it. And we specifically didn't do rules, because the moment you do rules for this, people are going to refer to the rules and stop thinking. And we didn't want that. So the rule is your player is going to let you know what they want and then do what they tell you.
That's pretty cool. So I know that in a lot of White Wolf Onyx Path games, you've got this big menu of merits and flaws, and you do have disabilities on the list of flaws, like blind or immobile. And so it's cool that it sounds like Legendlore has just foregone that.
Yeah, we did. It's up to you to decide if it's a flaw or not.
That's cool, and then just sort of rely on the storyteller to work it in narratively.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a super cool way of handling it. I think that it then, makes it so that player can be completely happy with the way that it's done, which, as in a game where you're playing yourself, I think that's even more important than in general. In general, it's always important. You want your players to be happy with the game they're playing, how it's being done.
Yeah.
But when you're playing yourself, it is a lot more sensitive. As you mentioned, like people are going to be way more attached to this character because it is them. And I think that's a really cool way of handling it.
Yeah, and not all people are alike, so there is no one rule that we could possibly write for this.
That's cool. I like that. So leading into that question, what system did you decide to use?
We went for D&D 5th edition.
Okay.
We might no, we went for D&D 5th edition because frankly I really love it. I don't like systems that are very finicky.
Mhm.
And D&D 5th edition is very simple. I mean, it's got, I love the advantage, disadvantage mechanic. So yeah, we opted for that.
Yeah, I've started playing D&D, technically 2nd edition, but I played a lot of 3rd edition 3.5.
Me too.
Yeah, I was not a fan of how finicky it was.
Yeah.
But I've come back to it with 5th edition, and yeah, I do like how streamlined it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I run a Pathfinder campaign, and I Pathfinder 1st edition because they've got a 2nd edition out just now, 1st edition, and I do enjoy that, and it does work for that group. But I personally like an easier system that allows me to, I don't know, not have to keep track of everything. Maybe I'm just a lazy storyteller. That's also an entirely possible option. But yeah, I like simple systems, and D&D 5th edition really fit that bill.
So, did you make any changes, any additions or alterations?
Well, we did extra classes and such, but there are only two specific changes that we make. One is that we dropped inspiration, not the bardic inspiration, but the inspiration with capital I, because Legendlore has a thing called legend. You design that completely for yourself. It is your epic destiny as you go into the realm. So your legend might be Mistress of Dragons, or Slayer of Demons, or whatever you want. And then you come up with rules for how that works, and what works for your legend and what works against your legend. And then if you work for your legend or you're hindered in a way that is interesting by your legend, you get a legend point, which goes into a communal pool, and everybody can dip into that pool to re-roll with advantage or gain advantage on a roll, or to introduce a narrative element like, oh, the guard outside our jail cell is that's the girl that I flirted with at the bar last night. So maybe I can talk her into letting us out.
That's cool.
So, but that does work a bit like inspiration does, and we thought that having both of them in the game would probably be too much. So we dropped inspiration. We now have legend. And the other thing we did is we introduced Menthrowak for the magic section. So Menthrowak in the comics is if they have a source of all magic. You do magic by tapping into the source, and if you do that too much, you get what they call a mind block, and it has all sorts of nasty effects. And they're so nasty, in fact, that at one point one of the evil people tries to trick another person into casting spells for him so that he doesn't get the mind block. And we played with that, and Travis wrote that actually. We didn't like the first version we had. The first version stuck very closely to the comics, which is if you do a lot of magic, you get hit with this mind block, which might render you unconscious or put you in a coma or all sorts of bad things, which is basically how it works in the comic. But then you have the problem that all the spellcasters are now nerfed, because the one thing that you do, which is cast spells, is going to get you in trouble. And we didn't like that. So we brainstormed. We actually got together for a brainstorming chat. We came up with a new system which deviates a little from the comics in that the player chooses if they want to use magic feats for free on their spell, and then in doing that they accumulate Menthrowak points, which are going to kick in at the end of the scene. So basically you can totally maximize and twin your spells now, and you'll be creating problems for yourself in 5 minutes, and And we both really like that because that puts it with the player. The player decides if they want to do that. And it also creates a mechanic where you solve current problems by making future problems. And that is my favorite thing in the whole world. So that is our new version. And those are the two big things that we changed. We've got the legend and the net.
So both really cool. So something that I've sort of picked up on a little bit is that so D&D traditionally gives the storyteller or the GM most of the power, and it sounds like even though you're using the fifth edition system, there is a lot of power in the given to the players beyond just narrative agency.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of player agency. I want players to choose if I'm fine getting the characters into trouble, but I want the players to choose if their characters are going to get in trouble. I want that fail-safe in there that you can go, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Especially if you're playing new, that's totally valid to just go, no, I'm not. I don't want to roll to see if there's a shark in the water. I don't like sharks. There are no sharks. Yeah.
That's fair. So this would be a question for both of you. Uh, what do you think are sort of the challenges inherent in being a storyteller or a game master for a game in which the players do have a lot of narrative agency?
I would say that it's in a way you're thinking on your feet a little bit more. I'm already used to having players that do really wild things that I could never expect. So that kind of already sets me up to be in a place where I'm used to my players having perhaps more agency than they may otherwise have in, perhaps other games they're in, because I'm a very whimsical game master. If they think of a cool idea, I'm going to try and help them do that idea. Which I think in a way, perhaps makes the switch to something like Legendlore a little bit easier because I'm used to my players having a lot of input in the world. But if you're not used to that, if you're used to having that tighter control of the narrative, tighter control of what your players are going to do and say, then I think that could certainly be a challenge for you. But I think it's a good challenge. I think it's a challenge that can make you a better storyteller in general because you're, learning to tell that story more with your players instead of just for your players, which I think is a super interesting idea. And even the idea of the legend points where they go into a pool that everybody can use. It's your players working more as a team with you instead of the idea of the game master against the players, which is something I've never really liked in general.
Yeah, so since you already do have this sort of you call it a whimsical style, so if someone is watching this and most of their experience has been running those very let's call them very linear games, which is what D&D really really supports and does well. So like what advice would you give them for transitioning to running a Legendlore game?
I would say maybe I think the session zero first is very important because that's how you're going to find out what your players want and need with the campaign. A session zero is always important for every game, but as mentioned by Steffi, it's even more important when they're playing themselves. I would say though that if you're trying to transition to doing that campaign where your players are in more control, maybe even try it out with a smaller adventure. Write less, plan less, but have different options, different roads they can take. Don't make such a tight narrative. Make more of an open world of, hey, you could do this, or you could go over here and do this. And give your players lots of options because it's going to be hard for you to give them the reins entirely, but maybe focus on how much detail you're writing out in general and how many options you're just giving them instead of directly giving them, okay, this is the quest, this is what you're doing, this is how you're doing it. Be like, here are your options. And I think that could probably help in a campaign where you're trying to transition to give your players more power.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. Thank you. Steffi, is there any Do you have
No, everything that Corinne said. Actually, the game that I run at conventions is about a young girl has gone missing, and the players need to find her. And I actually don't have anything planned after that. So I've got groups who go straight to tracking, following her footsteps. Okay, I know where she is, so you can follow them there. I've also had groups who are like, oh, I search her room, do I find a diary? Well, you do now. I mean, there wasn't a diary 5 minutes ago, but now that you look for it, yes, there's a diary. I've had people go, oh, I want to know who her best friend is, and I'm going to ask her best friend where she's gone. So I've run it 4 times, and every single time the group comes up with a different idea. And I just have, she's missing. I know what happened to her. I know where she is. And then whatever the players come up with to find her is the thing that works. And you just roll with it. And then, of course, a friend might know some details that a diary doesn't, and vice versa. And if you just track her, then you go to where she is, but you might not know what is going on. But I just, yeah, so I just have those. I've got where they need to end, and I've got where they need to start. And but I don't have anything. I don't have fixed steps in between. It's just whatever the players want to do is what's going to work for this. And I like that as a storyteller in general. I do that mostly because whenever I do come up with the fixed adventures, my players come up with something that I never came up with. So after a while, I just stopped.
Don't
Here's
they
a problem.
always?
Go at it. Tell me how you solve it.
So we have another question. Shinobi233. What kind of characters can we find in Legendlore?
As in NPCs or
Sure, NPCs or PCs.
the NPCs are people. I mean, I know that that doesn't sound epic, but that is you've got traders and merchants, and you've got fighters, and you've got warriors, and you've got generals. We've got a lot of good people. We've got a lot of bad people. But in terms of big NPCs, the one that we have is we've got a couple of kingdoms. We've got Carahil, which is a French kingdom run by Queen Fala, the Lady Fala, actually. And the interesting thing is that Lady Fala appears to be a title. So the Lady Fala and her daughter is then the next Lady Fala, and then the granddaughter is the next Lady Fala. So we've got a list of Lady Falas. We did say explicitly that the prerequisite for being a Lady Fala is being a woman, regardless of your physical characteristics. So that is, she's a sorceress. And we're actually reading the comics. I wasn't entirely sure if she's immortal and pretending to be multiple people, or if she's multiple people taking on the role of Lady Fala. So she's one of my favorite characters. We've got Ardonia, which is a lawful nation, and they have a king and a queen. And we actually weren't entirely certain which one of them is the constitutional monarch and which is married into the sovereignty. So that's interesting. That's a bit of a how do you call it? Where it's theocratic. It's partially theocratic. We've got Drome, ruled by Darkoth, the Dark Lord, who is, as the name implies, the villain. He's a conqueror. That isn't, Drome is not his land originally. He just came there one day and he conquered it, and now the people have to do what they want. But that also allowed us to play into, this is not a nation of evil people. These are just people, and their boss is bad. I think a lot of people should be able to sympathize with that just about now. So their boss is bad, and if you want to depose their boss, what you might want to do is start a revolution in the streets of Rome to kick this asshole out. So those are the three most powerful characters as NPCs, simply by way of they control the three largest stretches of land, which does matter in the end.
Neat. So, what sort of character classes can players look forward to creating?
So we have the original classes that you get in the player handbook. We have options for all of them except for the ranger, which is ironic because there is a ranger in the comics. They're called the Okoth Rangers. they patrol the forest of Okov, which is where we think werewolves live, and they keep the werewolves inside and they keep the people outside so that nobody gets hurt. But ironically, when we looked into them, it turned out that they would probably be a fighter class instead of a ranger class. So our rangers is now a fighter. But apart from that, we've got subclasses for everything. We've got 2 new classes. One is the alchemist, because the realm has a blend of magic that is sort of like magic and sort of like science, and the alchemists tap into that. And we've got a gunslinger class. Well, actually, I think that's a fighter subclass. In case you cross and you happen to bring a gun with you, that depending on which country you live in, that might actually be the thing that happens. But my first personal favorite is the artificer, which is the arcane artificer, and they work with strange things, which are objects that come from Earth, and they changed them with magic to be objects that also work in the realm. So you cross and you have your phone with you, probably. So you have your phone, but you don't have any Wi-Fi, and there's no signal, and there's nothing. But what you could do is maybe you could become an artificer and then craft your phone into a magic thing that allows you to Google, which mechanically means you cast divination and Legendlore spells through your phone. But it would work like you now have this crystal-studded steampunk couple wire thing that you are Googling with. That's how it would work narratively, and then mechanically you would cast Legendlore spells and such through that. And that's actually my favorite class, because that is absolutely what I would want to play.
Sounds like a lot of fun. As I mentioned before, I really like the portal fantasy as a genre. And so survival is a really strong theme in a lot of these stories about, Earth people coming into a fantasy world, and they're able to use their skills to greater or lesser extent, but the challenge is always on surviving in this new world somehow. And so how much does Legendlore have that?
It depends on how closely you want to stick to you, because you can absolutely say that because you watched a lot of Hunger Games, you are now a survivor, expert survival. That's a valid way to do that. But you could also say, no, I'm just going to stick to me. And if I were to be dropped in a forest with nothing to eat, I would be in serious trouble. That would not be good. Plus, I have allergies, so now the forest is actively trying to kill me.
Oh no! But you're playing your ideal self, so maybe.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I would want to keep my allergies. I mean, I've had them for a long time. Kind of a part of me. But yeah, so how much is it a survival? The good thing is that the people of the realm, depending on where you start, are friendly, and they do like news stories. We had one player who they wanted to they could trade food and lodging for stories, and the player goes, okay, so once upon a time there was a man named Tony Stark, and then he just and then he had 9 movies worth of stuff to share. So yeah, that got him room and board. So I think if you meet the right people, it's not that hard. But I think that is also true for Earth, that if you meet the right people who let you in, you're going to be better off.
Cool. As a storyteller, we talked a little bit about Session 0. What sort of things should a game runner keep in mind when you're doing this Session 0 for Legendlore?
I don't think it's too different from... well, one thing you should keep in mind that people don't have to explain themselves, as in, if somebody just goes, I want to play me, but 5 years ago, don't ask them why. Just tell them that's good, that's fine. They don't owe you an explanation of that. But other than that, you would touch on the usual, like what do we want from this game? What don't we want from this game? What do we want to do if people are uncomfortable? Do we want to have a physical symbol for that, or an X card, or just in case? Because you're never, because people need to understand, you're never going to touch on every single subject in a Session 0. It's impossible. There's always going to be a point where you as a player think, oh yeah, it didn't occur to me that I had to tell them that I'm afraid of birds or whatever.
And
So you want to touch on, so if that happens in game, how do we signal to each other that we need to stop? But those are the important things.
yeah, so viewers who want to know more should check out the show we did 2 weeks ago about safety tools in games.
Yeah.
So does Legendlore, I guess, come with some safety tools like packaged?
We do have them, yeah, in the GM chapter. The X card and the veils and the lines, yeah. But I think the most important thing is always to create an atmosphere at the table that allows you to opt out whenever you feel like it, without feeling the burden of, yeah, but then I'm pausing play and everybody is together and having fun, and then I'm the one who wants to stop. That's fine. Like, player comfort comes first, and GM comfort too.
Yes.
So I think
Yes,
actually
absolutely.
creating that atmosphere is more vital than any safety mechanism. But we do have them, of course, because you start with the safety mechanisms. But it's just that we shouldn't stop there.
I would say that if you are thinking about streaming Legend Lore, like we are, if you are, streaming a game where your players are themselves, that makes your safety tools even more important, because it's already important in general, but as soon as, people are opening themselves up to play themselves on a stream, I think they could very much get into that mindset of the show must go on. And you have to be careful with that, make sure that they know that they can stop the show, that it's fine, that, their comfort comes first, as a human before it comes, as professionalism for stream itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so that sort of feeds into another question I had, which is, excuse me, what are the challenges of running a game when everybody's playing themselves? Like, what happens if someone decides that they want to make a character and says, well, my ideal self is someone who can do everything perfectly and never gets anything wrong?
So here's a secret. I am not opposed to people cheating on games. I want players to have fun. So if one of my players is like, I want to succeed at every single role, and the other players are also like, yeah, fine, he can do that, then he can do that, as far as I'm concerned. But I have been told that I'm a bit of an outlier in that. So if one of the people at my table were to be like, I want to be perfect in every way, and the other players at the table would be like, sure, he can be perfect, then I would allow that. So that mechanically, I guess that person never has to roll. It sounds reasonably boring to me, but if that's what you want to do, then sure, go ahead. But it does depend on the other players being on board with that, because I could also imagine that if you have to roll and you fail your rolls, and then the person next to you is always going, yeah, I make that, you might get annoyed.
Yeah,
So
it would
you'd
be
want to
kind
discuss
of.
that with the group. But assuming the group is fine with it, I'm fine with it too.
Sounds like the dog has a question or two.
Yeah, she's a very chatty girl. Very chatty. Yeah, I would say that if you had a player who wanted to approach it as, my character knows how to act in every situation, knows how to do everything correctly, I think if the rest of the table's fine with that, then you can go with that. I think in general, though, the rest of the table might not be cool with that, unless, of course, you're doing some sort of, this person is the chosen one and we're like their gang. Then that might make sense. I think you probably could have some pushback from your table. I think it would be important to talk to the player and, try and instead maybe propose that instead of, doing everything perfectly, how about, everybody makes mistakes, but when you roll a failure, how about we discuss what happens and make sure that you're happy with that outcome?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can fail forward, you can make a mistake and it not be what you wanted to do, but you still did something good or something that leads to the greater good. Basically, you can fail forward, I think, is a good way to put it for somebody who wants to, who struggles with doing things incorrectly.
Yeah. And I also want to add that the purpose of a session 0 is to make sure that you have a group that is all on the same page and knows what they all want. The purpose of a session 0 is not necessarily to have everyone who's in the session 0 go forward with the campaign. So if you have a player who says, no, I just want to do everything perfectly without a roll, and you've got a group of players who goes, yeah, no, then the solution might be that this player can't play with this group. And that's also perfectly valid. Like the purpose of a session 0 is to figure out if the group is compatible and wants the same thing. And the answer to that might be no, they don't. And that's fine. Doesn't mean it's a bad player, but it does mean they don't work for this group.
Right. That would probably be my attitude, because I call it the I win button, where some players just want to keep hitting the I win button. And I don't really like playing with those people, and I don't really enjoy running stories for them because, like you said, it's boring. And for me, part of the fun of being a storyteller is giving my players like challenges, and then constructing the kayfabe to be like, oh, this is really difficult. Can you do it? And then watching them suffer, and then watching them succeed.
Yeah, I also think that the most interesting stories happen when plan A fails and now you've got to run your backup plan.
Yes.
So yeah, that is generally how I would do it. But you do have players who really resent if things don't work, and if you're playing new, that might actually kick into it more. No, but I am genuinely good at talking to people.
Yeah, I mean,
don't make me roll for that. I'm good at this.
Right. And that's also, I suppose, another thing that you would encounter, not necessarily someone who's like, I'm good at everything all the time, but I'm really good at this and there's no way I could fail.
I think one way to kind of deal with that in a session, if it's something that that person is generally very good with, they're playing themselves, there is always the option to, for that specific thing in this specific instance, they don't have to roll. Maybe if they can give you that that good argument, or if they can say what their character does, what they do, then I think there is always exceptions to the rule there, especially in a game that's made to be built around your players working with you and your players building the story. I would say, though, if it basically depends on the story for them to, for this to be up to chance, or if it depends on the story for them to need to fail, there is always the, you tell a really convincing story, but this guard just doesn't believe you. Maybe they have a different reason that you don't know for not believing you, or maybe they believe you, they just don't care. There's...
Yeah.
When the NPCs have motivations of their own, even if you do something perfectly, it might not always go the way you want it to.
That actually came up in my Pathfinder campaign just 2 days ago. They were interrogating what my players suspect is cultists, and they were interrogating them, and they rolled actually very well. The problem is that without magic, you can't force someone to tell people. You can make them friendly, but you can't force them into a confession. So these cultists were just like, lawyer, I want to talk to my lawyer. And my players were, we rolled so well. I'm sorry, I really wish I could give you more, but they're not going to confess just because they like you. That would be stupid. I mean, if I was a murderous cultist, I wouldn't just confess to people I met 12 minutes ago because they seem friendly. That seems like, and these were, if they were cultists, which if my players are watching, they were not cultists. But if they were cultists, they were well-instructed cultists who were informed on what to do if people questioned you. So they immediately went for, am I under arrest? I want to speak to a lawyer. And my players, of course, said, oh, now I feel very uncomfortable given everything that's going on with the world. So we are going to back off. So,
see, I would, I'd have the cultists start giving the recruitment spiel.
You seem great. Join my club.
exactly. We've got a sawmill here, and we decapitate people upstairs.
But we have great dental.
Yeah. That's the cottage feel. We have
I
great
mean,
dental.
that would get me to at least, check out services.
Yeah, we've got healthcare.
Yeah.
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 Healthcare, no pre-existing conditions. Join us. Do you pay off my student loans? Because I'm in.
Right.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose intuitively as a storyteller, one reason that I would sort of put forward is like, yeah, you're really good at this thing on Earth, and now you're in like a different culture, you're stressed out, so not everybody is going to be at their best.
Yeah. Yeah, and in Legendlore, also keep in mind that there is no common, like languages, there is no common. We looked at, like I said, the geographical similarities between certain nations and Earth nations. But so basically, we all Carahol, the people speak French. Do you speak French? And fortunately, in every single game I've ran, there was somebody who went like, yeah, kind of ish. And so we took it from there. But you could also go like, no, I don't speak French. Well, that's too bad because that is the language that they speak in this country. So
I think my answer would be I speak Spanish.
yeah,
Does that count?
is that close enough? Or yeah. So that's another added difficulty in Legendlore, that we don't have a common language. We just have these people speak. There's a list somewhere in one of the chapters. These people speak French. These people speak English. There is an English. That's good for most of us. There is a Spanish. So yeah, and then the question is, do you speak that? Mind, you can absolutely say after you've been in the realm for a while, because like, yeah, I picked up on it. I now speak French, because you don't want to run 12 sessions, with a translator by your side. But that
Right.
is a fun snack to throw at people in the beginning. Like, so everybody here speaks Spanish.
So what was the design decision behind that?
That I think common language is just, it's a little weird to have. Like, I mean, you could say that English is common, but even here, not everybody speaks English. It's just, if you say that everybody speaks common, then you create this sort of cultural monotony that everybody, and I don't like that. So I just stuck with, mind if you're a storyteller and you want to introduce common, just go ahead.
Right.
But no, because they were so similar to Earth, I went like, no, these people speak French. The traders probably speak English too, because that is their largest trade partner. So you can look out, it's not that they only speak French. But so yeah, the design decision was that I think common is a weird conceit that works well in traditional fantasy settings, but in a setting where you want to kind of wink and nod to the fact that these countries are inspired by nations from Earth, I think it works, especially, and then if you throw in you play you, I think it works well to just go, so what kind of language, what languages do we have to table? What does everybody speak? And then see if you're in luck. And you probably are. I mean, you can just go find a trader and they tend to speak a lot of languages. That's what they do.
Nice. So are there traditional D&D groups like elves and dwarves? Are we going to see those?
Yeah. We do have elves and dwarves and trolls and orcs as player options, as well as humans. We did want to see that. We did want to say that not all elves are the same, because again, that doesn't make sense. So they do have a traditional homeland, but they've since moved. So you can find elves everywhere. And it's entirely possible to play an elf who grew up not in the elven homeland, but somewhere else, and who thus has cultural bonuses that might not be traditionally elven. Because that's another thing that strikes me as weird with D&D. Like, why are all the elves the same? Legendlore actually has it. They've got two groups of to begin with, the rainbow elves and the forest elves. But yeah, same for the dwarves. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me that all dwarves are alike. So where they are alike, it's because they grew up under certain conditions that, if you grow up in a nation of, for example, the Dutch. I'm Dutch, and the Dutch traditionally speak a fair amount of languages because we're a very small country who have relied on trade for most of our existence. Trade and also going around the world and stealing everything that we can. I should, because in Dutch history books we try to make it be more noble than it is, but we also just stole a lot of stuff from a lot of people. But so our tradition is that we speak a lot of languages because that comes in handy if you're traders who sail around the world. But that doesn't mean that all Dutch people get born naturally good at language. It's just that that's how we happen to be raised. And so the same goes for the dwarves. If they're good at languages and good at haggling, it's because they come from a nation of traders. But you can play a dwarf who was raised by elves and just use the elven bonus.
So would it be possible, because I know people who would jump on this if it were possible, to cross over, to play themselves, and to pop out as an elf?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. If your true self is an elf, you're going to pop out as an elf. The other elves are going to recognize that something is off with you, mind. But you are going to, and again, because it's magic, the crossing is magic, you are going to get, if you want, the cultural bonuses of an elf. Because you became an elf because you have an affinity with this culture, so you get the cultural bonuses because it's magic.
I know a couple of people who are going to love this game.
So yeah, so you can be an elf, you can be a harefoot. I actually, when I had to start myself and talk about silly reasons, I went with harefoot and pixie all the time because I'm short in real life, and they're the small size. Actually, the elves, the pixies are like this big, and hare feet are halfling sized. So that was my entire reason for choosing them. Like, I'm short, I'm going to play a harefoot. But yeah, so any reason you want to come up with to play any people, you can.
That's cool. So, how should players sort of think about characters during character creation? It's like what advice would you give them?
I would say, because the purpose of the game is to have fun, you can do two things. You can be totally honest. You can read all the people and all the classes and just go, that's me, that's me. You can also do it backwards and just go, I want to play this and I want to play that, and I'm going to find a reason to do that. And you probably can, because you're probably drawn to those two because you like them, and that can be enough for a crossing to do its magic, to go, yes, you become an elf because you like elves. That's it. So yeah, I would just not take it too. I wouldn't spend. I think you probably know when you read the people, you're probably going to go, oh, this is me. Maybe there might be two that you go, oh, this is me, and then you've got to choose. But you probably just know when you read them. So I wouldn't think too hard on it. Just go with whatever feels right.
Yeah. What about you, Corinne?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is very much kind of like a go with your gut. Like, from what I've been reading, as I've been building a campaign around it. If you're making a character in the setting, I think as you read things, you kind of know what appeals to you, and whether that's just because it's like you or because it's what you want to be doesn't necessarily matter, because the you in Legendlore is the idealized version of yourself. It's who you are, but also who you want to be. And so I think, pick what makes you happy, and you can do that based on whether you just like it or whether, like, yes, as this is described, it reflects me. I think both ways are totally valid. And I think that's something that's really cool about the setting, is as you read the different group descriptions, the different class descriptions, you do kind of start to get a sense of what is you. You might have to pick between a couple things, because nobody is a monolith, nobody is one thing, but I think you are very much able to find the parts of it that fit you, and then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neat. So we talked a lot about theories, so I kind of want to talk more about what's specifically in the game, like so the cool narrative parts. So like what uh what are some cool mysteries for players to uncover in this world? Because I read a little bit about the Order of Healers who trace back to
Yes.
Buddhist.
Yeah, yeah, I love that so much. So, Legendlore does not have native deities. It doesn't have created deities. There's one goddess mentioned in the book, who is Otharis. And if you read the book, she is probably a woman from Earth uh, who either was a Buddhist or followed Buddhist teachings, um, and who traveled into the realm and became a goddess, probably through her legend. Her legend could be become a goddess. So she became a goddess. She is the goddess of fire and healing, which I love because it really ties into sometimes you have to burn things down before you can heal. And she's the only goddess they have, and she's very revered. She's got her own clerical order. She's got paladins who basically fight for her. She's got there are three actually. Oh, and a monk. Yeah, she's got a cleric and a monk, um, and they invoke her, and she grants them magic. But of course, keeping in the tradition of she was probably a Buddhist, it might not be that they invoke her, but rather that they invoke the divinity in themselves. But yeah, so she was probably a person from Earth. And that is definitely something that you could discover as you go. Like I actually had that one person in a convention game immediately jumped on the idea to play Cleric of Otharis, and she at one point found a holy book that Otharis had left behind, and it was a book from Earth filled with ideas that this woman had, and so she slowly pieced together like, wait, is Otharis from Earth? Yes, she is. So I like that, and also because it ties into the self-sovereignty that if you want to become a god, then in Legendlore you can. So that's interesting. Another thing that they have, another mystery that people can uncover, is where Darkoff, the Dark Lord, comes from, and what's going on with him, and what his secret identity is. And I don't know if that helps with defeating him. I mean, his secret identity is pretty much like, yeah, that's hard to deal with, but that's an interesting backstory. So there's a couple. Lady Fala intrigues me a lot because again, I'm not sure if reading the comics, I was genuinely not sure if she was the same Lady Fala the entire time or different Lady Falas. I think we eventually for the role-playing game we went with the different Lady Falas, but you could still go with the same Lady Fala, and that could be a mystery to uncover. How does she become immortal? Most people are not immortal. So yeah, there's a couple of mysteries in there. We've got demons and undead who are trying to raise the earth. So yeah, so there's enough to do. You just need to pick one, obviously, or two, or three.
What about you, Corinne? Did you see anything cool jump out at you?
Yeah, I think one of the aspects that really jumped out to me as, kind of a mystery are the different places where there are like the crossings of locations. So, there it's listed in the book that you can stumble upon like the Library of Alexandria, I believe, or there was numerous other locations that like they don't exist on Earth anymore or don't seem to, but they're here now. And I think that is a super cool idea because that opens the door to a lot of things. Are there other locations that are showing up now? Do they only show up when they're gone from Earth, or, things like that? And then there was the descendants of I can't think of her name right now.
Amelia
Lady
Earhart.
Yes, Amelia Earhart. I was like, lady, flew a plane. Yeah, the descendants of Amelia Earhart, who are all in this specific location, like flying planes to this day, because when she disappeared, she actually crossed through a crossing. And there is a specific crossing in the air that often catches planes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very cool premise. I think I'm most fascinated by the crossings, I think, and what things get crossed and
Yeah.
how they then affect the world.
Yeah.
So, what sort of aesthetic does this game have? Is it high fantasy, low fantasy? You mentioned steampunk once or twice, I think, Steffi.
Yeah, one of the nations has, most of it is low fantasy, maybe high fantasy. Yeah, the high fantasy probably. I think of officially that it's whether you have magic or not. They do have magic. They don't have dragons, so um, so kind of in betweenish. But one nation has fully embraced science. They denounce. Ironically, they do. That's Adonia. They worship the goddess Atharis, but they also embrace science over religion. And because science works slightly different, they have zeppelins and such. So of course, then I went like, yeah, that's a steampunk nation. Whether that is a steampunk nation in your game is up to you. It's how I like to run it. I like to really go into them embracing strange things and working with that. But if that's not what you like as a storyteller, you can just downplay that again. But I personally love that, so I just run with it in my campaigns.
That's cool. So I am really looking forward to the art in this book.
Yeah, me too. I haven't seen that much yet.
Yeah. So is it going to be its own style or like harkens back to the comics?
Well, the comics are black and white, and we do have some art that comes from the comics. I've also seen color art. People can go to the Kickstarter and check it out. I haven't seen all of the art pieces yet because they roll in. So I'm actually pretty excited to see the art, but I haven't seen all of them yet. So that is very much up in the air. Mike Cheney would probably know more about that.
I'm sure once the Kickstarter rolls out, we'll get to see.
Yeah.
So what sort of stretch goals do you have in mind?
Well, we would like to add more backgrounds and feats and classes. I would love to be able to explore what we can do with West Azoth, because the one thing East Azoth, where we are, does not have, and that I would love to have, is good goblins. Good as in no people are born inherently, but as people as a whole, they tend to be hostile. And they have got a very good reason for that, because they used to live in Rome, and then their country got usurped, and they were like, could somebody help us? And then the other nations were like, nah. So yes, now they are hostile. You should have helped them.
That seems justifiable to me.
It does. A lot of them, yeah, that was one thing that we wanted. Like the comics, obviously, because they are fantasy comics, they do have antagonistic races, but with all of them, I wanted to go like, yeah, they've got a good reason to be antagonistic. But so we don't have the player option of a goblin, because the goblins that we have are too antagonistic. And I would actually, but then we came up with the idea that in West Azoth, because their land that they had there was not usurped and all of this didn't happen, that might introduce a player option. And then what I want to do is, once we have that player option, I want to then go like, you could also play a goblin from East Azoth who is resisting this oppressive regime, because that's what I would want to play. But we weren't sticking to the comics. We weren't able to introduce that in the core book, and I would love to explore that in a stretch goal. That would be, and also in on that side of the mountains, they've got what I think is probably like a dragonborn. They didn't specifically, they call them dragon people, but sounds like dragonborn to me. We never see them on screen. They've got centaurs, which is pretty awesome. And they've got people with cat ears. I'm not entirely sure if that is a class for people. But yeah, so I would love to do a stretch goal on West Azul because that is where the comics don't go, which means that it gives you the most creative freedom. Because by now I've got a pretty good handle on how this world works, so I think I could probably fill in those blanks.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and one thing I would also love to do is we wrote a couple of legends for the core book, but not a ton of them because legend is very specific to your character. But what I would love to do is write more examples of how those work. And because I think we have 5 or 6 in the core book, but I would love to give more of them, delve into the archetypes that people do like to play.
That sounds really, really cool. I definitely hope that you make your stretch goals.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see those. I think being able to explore, the area that hasn't really been touched on would be great.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, right now, the east portion of the continent is pretty well documented. You hear about basically every nation, the people in those nations, the history.
Yeah.
But there's a whole another part of the continent that's just not touched upon at all, which I think that makes a great stretch goal. And getting more legends, I think, would be cool. Because I think right now, it gives you kind of a rough idea of like, okay, these are some legends. This is how you can implement them. But, always getting more examples, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah, because you have to write your own legend, unless you want to be, because I think we have we've got the Mystics of Dragons, and we've got if that's what you want, then good, we've got you covered. But in theory, people write their own legend. And I can imagine that might be a little daunting. I'm also not saying that people have to, we also say that in the book, you don't have to start the campaign with a legend. It's perfectly fine to just start playing and then halfway through go, I know what I want to be. I want to be a goddess. And then you sit down with your GM and you write your legend. That is valid. And that's probably how I would do it, because I have never had a campaign where I started with a character and it turned out to be exactly like how I envisioned them during character creation. I've always gone to my storyteller and I'm like, can I change some of my stats around? Can I change some of my abilities around? So I would actually recommend not starting with a legend and just seeing how it evolves. But yeah, I would love to give more examples of that, because that is the part that is probably the most work for the players and probably the most daunting. It's not as daunting as it seems if you get into it, but that is probably the bit that seems the most daunting.
Yeah, well, so it makes sense to me in that, 5th edition, you've got your class at level 1, but you don't really specialize until level 2 or 3, unless you're playing a wizard.
Yeah.
And so that seems like it gives you some good buffer time for you to figure out, like, okay, this is my legend, this is my me character in a fantasy world.
Yeah. Mostly, this is the epic quest that I want to fulfill with my character. I want to, reunite the nations. I want to defeat Darkoth. I want to tear down the walls that the Ardonians built. God, that was a big discussion we had. Like, they're a good nation. They build a wall. We should probably address this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's my dog again. She is so quirky today.
Your legend might be go smash that stupid wall.
Oh, she's got things to say.
She really does.
She wants to smash walls. Good dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Awesome.
So where would you, other than the comics themselves, where would you direct people to look for inspiration for what they should write a campaign about?
I would definitely recommend the old Dungeons and Dragons anime cartoon. I think that is a really great example of how to do a game like that. And with we're back home. Oh no, we're not back home. And also we took some inspiration from Sliders. That used to be a sci-fi show a really bad show, but I loved it. And they also had this idea, they were always sliding into different worlds. They didn't stay in one world, they slided into different worlds and everything was different. And then at one point they thought they came home, but the gate wasn't creaking. And so they went back again, but then it turned out that it was their home, but just their dad had finally oiled the gate.
Oh, no.
So sad, so sad. Yeah, but so Sliders and the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
I know the thing that it made me think of, basically, as soon as I started reading it, was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Because the idea of a crossing, the wardrobe
Yep.
is basically their crossing, and that time can move differently. That you can,
Yes.
live an entire life, win an entire war, and then you go back and it's been no time at all.
Yeah.
Where you can live this parallel life in a place where you're a hero or a king or, a general, and then you go back home and you're just you again.
You.
And yeah, that's what it made me think about, was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
Neat. So I am just about done running through my personal list of questions. Again, if our Twitch audience has anything that they want to ask, feel free. But yeah, so do you have any sort of, I guess, final thoughts, final contributions or insights, anything you want to say?
I don't actually. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
We've covered just about everything mechanically, and we've gone over the different countries and such. So I think we actually covered a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Corinne?
I think I would just say that, even if playing Legendlore with your players as themselves or with you as yourself isn't something that appeals to you, and maybe give it a shot anyway. But also, you can use it as a side quest, as something that happens in your normal campaign, to maybe get a feel for the world, to see how it works, to play it as someone other than yourself for a little while. And, maybe after you've done that, you'll want to play as yourself to get that full experience of being whoever you want to be, whoever you are in this world. But, until you do that, playing as a side quest I'm going to have a lot of fun with it, running it like that. Just being able to introduce real world things to these high fantasy characters who have never, seen a cell phone in their life before will be pretty funny, in my opinion.
Yeah, and actually,
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, what I also like about the idea of your campaign is that what you could also do, especially if you're running several Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition campaigns, because then you don't have to worry about changing up the rules or changing the stats. But you could, if somebody is playing in Mythical Odysseys of Theros and somebody's playing Ravnica and then somebody's playing Forgotten Realms and you've got this group of friends and you're all playing different campaigns, you could totally just get together, keep your own character and go, yeah, we all ported into the realm. Here we are. Me with my artificer from Ravnica, and you with your heroic hero from Theros, and you with your dark elf ranger from Forgotten Realms. I think Forgotten Realms is the Drizzt. Yeah, problematic character. I know. I fully concede that. But yeah, you could all get together and just go, yeah, this is it. We didn't prepare a different world. We just all bring our own characters, and we're running a game here. I think that actually would be a lot of fun.
I think so too. I think it's a good way to, get a lot of different people together if you're all playing different games, or to do something when your normal DM's gone.
Yep. And then one of them is a dog because he's named Pugmire. How awesome is that?
Exactly. Like, if you get like Scarred Lands characters like we're getting in mine, and Pugmire characters, like it's going to be these characters who have never just seen a dog person wandering around, and here's a dog person. All right.
Yeah. But also because and Pugmire and Scarred Lands totally are so different. One is just like, apocalyptic survival D&D, and the other is good boys. And then these characters meet. They're gonna have such different outviews on life. Like,
it's gonna be great when the
is.
dog encounters humans for the first time.
Yeah, because they think they're gods, right?
Right.
That's going to be so weird.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
Yeah, like there's so much you can do with that, and I think that, you know, even if you're not using Legendlore for its, you know, base setting idea of you play as you can really have a lot of fun with the idea of all these characters from different worlds get to meet now. Here
Yeah,
you go.
they meet. Here's a cell phone.
Yeah, they meet. Here's a cell phone. Figure it out.
Yeah. And the dog is going to be like, oh yeah, wait, I've read about this.
Yeah.
And the Scott Lance character is just going to be like, I smash it.
Is this some sort of strange magics?
I'm sorry, Travis. I know that Scott Lance isn't all apocalyptic. But
I would really love to see like the Pugmire crossover character whose legend is be a good dog.
oh yeah, oh that would be amazing. Be the best dog. like on Twitter actually the other day I saw this thread about was it a Puerto Rican dog who accompanied protesters to protest, and
Yes.
he was always very loyal to the protesters, and he would attack all the police officers. Like, best dog.
Yes.
Have your
Combat
legend
helper.
be to be the best dog.
Yes, be the best dog.
A good companion
So,
and a good friend.
Now I'm looking forward to Corinne's game even more.
Playing Corin's game now.
The more dogs, the merrier.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Play cat.
We do have rules for cats. I'm still waiting for the rules for dogs from Travis. So once we get those, people can actually start making their good boys.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, well, so thank you both so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here. This was a lot of fun. I can't wait to play with both of you in two different games.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to that chance to sort of see the game from two different angles. Yes, so my name is Rachel. You can find me pretty much everywhere as Stolen Fires. Uh, and the apparently Russ Charles created an Awakened Doggo mod already.
I'll have to check that out because, yeah, Travis already had the rules for the cats, but not for the dogs. So
Yeah.
I'm going to
So,
write that down.
So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So and the Kickstarter goes live on Thursday.
Tomorrow.
So yeah. So back that. It should be cool. It should be a lot of fun. Yeah. You can go ahead and post a link. Sometimes they get garbled. But you can certainly find Corinne on Twitter. Yeah. So on that note, Corinne, if people want to find you, send you links, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Manic Pixie Girl, no E in Pixie. That's where you'll find me a lot of the time. I can also be found on Roll the Rolls Twitch or playing games on this channel on Saturdays where I run Scarred Lands, Purge of the Serpent Holds, and will be running Legendlore, the Metal Scourge on Tuesdays coming up soon. But yeah, that's basically where you find me. And yeah, I hope to see y'all again.
Awesome. And Steffi, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as 100 Things I Love. That's the number 100 Things I Love. And then I've got all of my links in the pinned post, so you can put down from there.
Awesome. Yeah, so thank you all so much. Yeah, come check us out on Kickstarter. I will be running a show here tomorrow evening, Changeling the Dreaming. Yeah, thank you so much. Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, protest
Black Lives
safely,
Matter.
and please stay safe, everybody. I hope you all have a good night.
Good night.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Good night. Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to transition and...